Hello there, I'm Fintusius, and with the long-awaited 9.1 PTR now live, which is going to bring us a lot of new class-related goodies over the coming weeks through changes and updates made to the Covenant abilities, new Covenant ability-themed legendaries, conduits, and new Soulbind passives amongst other things, but most importantly, at least to me, as of day 1 of PTR, more than 20 entirely new or reworked PvP talents and changes which were previously teased during the February BlizzCon Online presentation have been added into the game, so this is what I'll cover here today. The reason I say as of day 1 of PTR is because some of you might rejoice from the changes, buffs, or even lack of nerfs, as for example I couldn't have said this better myself.
There's no nerfs to Warrior.
First off, let's start with the heavy-hitting first news with Death Knights and the removal of the Heartstop Aura PvP talent entirely, which is going to make a lot of people happy, but not necessarily DKs themselves, as that talent was the primary reason behind the current strength in PvP, but it wasn't really fun for anybody. To compensate, they have received a new talent known as Shroud of Winter, which reduces the range of your spells when the DK is standing close to you. This honestly feels to me at the moment pretty weak, as due to the effect working just like their previous auras, meaning they have to stand on top of the target, the only real effect would be that enemy casters would have a very hard time casting any spells on your friendly healer standing safely far behind you, and thus being protected from enemy CCs or interrupts, as the range would decrease from 40 to 31 yards. With the current state of DKs, the removal of Heartstop Aura puts DK mains on suicide watch, and I expect and would hope more changes are coming to the spec in the coming weeks, as this puts them in a relatively weak spot in PvP, both Unholy and Frost DKs alike. Next up we have the Mage, and oh boy, there's a lot to cover, so let me start with Arcane. Kleptomania, the #1 suspect for Rested Druid Fun removal, has been nerfed by making it only available to the Arcane spec. So fellow tree huggers, rejoice, as you might not shed tears anymore whenever fire mages steal all your hearts from you, then combust you to death. Arcane Blast damage has been buffed by 20% in PvP combat, which is going to increase their burst potential by a noticeable amount, especially if you were to pair it in the combo with the brand new PvP talent Arcanosphere. As shown on screen, this is a brand new 4-second channel ability that increases in size and damage the longer you channel the spell before releasing it, and once you do, it knocks back any enemies that comes in contact with it. The knockback duration, however, remains the same, no matter how long you've channeled it, which might come in handy to quickly bump people into Ring of Frost, for example. After some testing, this fully channeled orb with cities on the geared character can do a hit of about 25k at the moment, but this is obviously subject to change. What's important to note is that the orb goes through any terrain, so it's going to work even if you were to cast it through an arena pillar, as it's just going to pass through the pillar, then hit and knock back your enemies standing behind it. Moving on, we have the Fire spec, which received a few nerfs on top of that Kleptomania change I mentioned earlier, by having the Infernal Cascade conduit damage reduced by 20% and the Kindling talent reduction lowered to 1 second. The PvP talent Controlled Burn has been redesigned. It now increases ignite damage by 100% while combustion is not active, instead of making it tick 100% faster. This is an overall DPS gain outside of combustion, but a nerf to the combustion fast burst window due to this change. The spreading part of the spell has also been removed. The PvP talent Word in Flames has also been changed as shown on screen in the tooltip, but this is likely not going to see play outside of some RBG AoE memes. All is not grim, however, for fire mages, as a new spell has been added straight out of Karazhan, known as Ring of Fire. After some testing, this is what you should know about the spell. The way the effect triggers is similar to how Ring of Frost works. If you step on the side, it's going to leave you with a magical dispellable dot effect that burns for 24% of your max HP over 6 seconds. Re-entering the ring while having the dot effect will not refresh the effect. However, if it ends after 6 seconds, you can have it reapplied, as the ring lasts for 8 seconds. This might actually turn out to be quite strong, since you can place it on top of a target that is locked down through a spell such as Kidney Shot or Polymorph, and with just a 30-second cooldown it can make every Kidney Shot window pretty deadly, as it scales off of max HP, which will result in a lot of damage outside of a combustion window, so don't cross out fire mages just yet. However, having said that, check this out. It would appear it is time for Frost to rise in the next season, even though it is already good, as Frostbolt PvP damage has been increased substantially from 15 to 100%. To compensate for that big buff, Deep Shadow has been nerfed from 150% to 75, just so you don't go around casting 45k Frostbolts, but just 25k instead. Burst of Cold's damage has been increased to a whooping 600% bonus, which you can see the result on screen in a duel, resulting in 50 to 20k coins of cold. But that's not all, as a new PvP talent has been added, known as Ice Wall, that has a 1.5 minute cooldown. When cast, it creates a big wall of ice that has 40% of the mage's max HP, so go ahead and combo it with the Battlemaster Trinket and is destroyable by enemies. This wall blocks line of sight for both parties, meaning that you cannot cast spells on people standing behind it and vice versa, unless you destroy it by clicking it off, or your enemy does it by just killing it. It utilizes the Ring of Peace coding, which means you could definitely block off an enemy healer in the side of a wall, making him unable to cast anything unless his allies would destroy that wall. Now, having said that, this wall is actually targetable by friendly characters, which means you can have your healer heal the wall so that the person stays blocked, or even better, using a Paladin's Blessing of Sacrifice offensively on it so that you can guarantee that the enemy team wouldn't be able to kill it anytime soon. If you'd like to, however, destroy your own team as well because, for example, your mage was not very talented and blocked you off, you can just click it off to destroy it, as showcased in the clip. Oh, and I almost forgot, as a last change, the mage PvP talent Dampened Magic has been removed altogether. Coming up next, we have Mistweaver monks, and boy did they receive a lot of love. Invest now as I expect the Mistweaver stock to rise pretty soon. They received 3 brand new PvP talents and 3 big PvP talent redesigns. However, as this is a monk class special passive, most of them are currently bugged on the PTR, so the footage was hard to record. Peaceweaver is a new PvP talent that reduces revival cooldown by 50% and provides immunity to magical damage and harmful effects for 2 seconds. Yes, this does indeed make you able to fully dispel your team from unstable afflictions without getting silenced or damaged in the process, while also making your team immune to magical damage for 2 seconds. I'm sure Mistweavers would love that talent to be baseline for PvE too, but alas, not today. Dematerialize is a new PvP talent that is a passive. Yes, passive that reduces damage while stunned by 40% for 3 seconds and procs every time you get stunned. Yeah, that's well, let's just say that a lot of Mistweavers are about to get their bottle of champagne right now. Thunderfocus Tea is also a new PvP talent that makes you able to knock back an enemy instantly through Crackling Jade Lightning or making your next Essence Font a Turbo Blessing of Freedom. Counteract Magic has been redesigned, which is kind of a nerf I would say, as it was a great talent before, but we'll have to see how it's going to play out. After dispelling a target from hostile effects, it increases the healing you do to them by up to 30% for 10 seconds, stacking up to 3 times. This doesn't mean you need to dispel 3 times, as dispelling 3 magical effects will grant it 3 stacks immediately, and this will pair nicely with another redesigned talent known as Refreshing Breeze. Even though it is currently bugged, the way it should work is that it's going to make Expel Harm into a strong single target heal after just a couple seconds of a Soothing Mist channel, on top of being an additional dispel effect that isn't the normal 8-second CD dispel. As a result of this, the Surging Mist PvP talent has been removed as it served a similar purpose in gameplay. Lastly, Eminence has also been redesigned into yet another buff to Monk's biggest weakness of dying in any stun. This PvP talent will now allow you to use Transcendence while stunned or have its cooldown reduced by 15 seconds if used outside of a stun effect. Yeah, that's pretty good. Moving on, we have Priest with just a few changes, as a new PvP talent has been added for all 3 Priest specs, being Improved Mass Dispel, which reduces its mana cost by 30% and makes it have only a 15-second cooldown. This is going to be superb for Shadow Priest most specifically, as it's going to allow them to support their team and surely their healer quite heavily with these frequent mass dispels from different kinds of crowd controls. A very welcome talent compensation, as Shadow Priests have had their Lasting Plague PvP talent removed alongside their Void Bolt conduit damage nerfed from 35 to 20%, which will result in quite a bit of a DPS loss. Next up, we have Rogues with a round of nerfs, as their loved or hated legendary power, Mark of the Master Assassin, has had its duration reduced by 40% in PvP, making the buff now last for about 2.5 seconds instead of 4. On top of that, the hated by most Conduit Cloaked in the Shadows has been redesigned into a simple 10% max HP shield when you enter stealth for 4 seconds, so no more infinite restalls through lines of dots, as the permanent shield will no longer protect rogue players. The good news to compensate those nerfs is that Assassination Rogues received a new PvP talent known as Hemotoxin, which is going to be their own and even stronger version of Sharpened Blade applied through Shiv. This will make Shiv reduce healing effects by an additional 40% on top of poisons for 9 seconds. After testing, yes, it does indeed stack with poison, making your target take more than 60% less healing for 9 seconds every 25 seconds, which is honestly pretty insane, as you can expect to get a Shiv after every kidney shot, making it super hard for a healer to recover, and honestly a bit oppressive when I just think about it. Those new Mistweaver talents will definitely help to combat that amount of pressure. Those are all the rogue changes for now, but while we're still on the topic of stealth, here is me stealthily telling you that I run my little WoW PvP school classes for players of all skill level in the form of Twitch streams every Monday, Wednesday, Friday over at twitch.tv/Venthusius. So if you ever feel like you're stuck in an arena rating or having problems on how to improve in PvP, I'd love it if you would stop by the streams, and together we'll make sure that you'll be set on the path to getting much better in PvP and be able to chase that gladiator title in no time. So anyway, let's get back on track with Warlocks now and buckle up, as there's a few things for you to to know, and let's start with the new PvP talent for all Warlock specs known as Shadow Rift on a 1-minute cooldown. How it works is that you can place a zone on the ground under or near your enemies, which is going to teleport them to the location of your demonic circle as long as they're standing in it after it goes off after 2 seconds. It currently isn't capped in the amount of targets teleported, which means that aside from throwing people off cliffs in the Maw, you might even throw off entire raided battleground teams in the Eye of the Storm for a guaranteed Reddit front page clip. As mentioned before and shown on screen, you have 2 seconds to go out of it as a player in order to not get teleported by the enemy Warlock. Moving on, let's talk Affliction, and here you're probably not going to have a good time. It's getting a few PvE damage nerfs which will impact the PvP damage a bit, but most importantly, the Sacrilege legendary power has been redesigned by having it buff corruption damage and increase curse durations every time it ticks. However, the corruption slow effect has been removed from the game, which played a critical role in the effectiveness of the Affliction spec and PvP as a whole. On top of that, the PvP talent Soul Shadow has been removed, however I'm sure you've never heard about its existence anyway. Now don't get set too fast as good stuff is coming, so let's talk Demonology. The Summon Fellowlord PvP talent has been quite buffed and it scales now at 200% of the caster's spell power, but the cleave itself still does physical damage. After testing on a fully geared blade character, these cleaves are still hitting for about 5k without any setup or CDs, which means it's going to do 8 to 10k hits when set up properly on non-heavy plate characters. A notable mention is that thanks to the new Shadow Rift PvP talent, you will now be able to force teleport people onto your own Fellowlord, creating that way a quite powerful combo. Coming up next, you have a new PvP talent known as Fell Obelisk, which is going to be your personal mini Bloodless buff totem on a 45-second cooldown, as it's going to buff both your minion's attack speed and your cast speed by 20%. When placed down, it can be destroyed as it only has 5% of your maximum HP and follows the same rules of line of sight as for example a Sky Fury totem does, meaning you're going to want to try and place it in a good place so that it doesn't get instantly killed by your enemies. And finally, we have Destruction, because apparently we didn't have enough fun with them in 8.3. Even though the Focused Chaos PvP talent was removed, Chaos Bolt received a double buff to its damage, making it overall deal slightly more than it did with the talent previously, as it received a 10% damage buff and on top of that an additional 25% increase in PvP. Without being locked out of the Havoc spell due to the removal of Focused Chaos, you will now be able to hit big Chaos Bolts on 2 targets at the same time in PvP, making it particularly deadly given the right scenario. Oh and yeah, nuking entire teams with 10 Chaos Bolts is also back on the menu. Destruction Warlocks also received a new PvP talent known as Bonds of Fel, which is going to feel familiar if you've ever fought Gul'dan atop the Nighthold. With a 30-second cooldown and a 1.5 cast time, this one is going to work like a reverted Shadow Rift, as it's going to bind your targets within a zone that is going to deal damage to them if they decide to go out of it and break the bond. This also means that if you decide to stay within the zone for 4 seconds, the Fel bond will expire and you will not trigger its damage. Yes, you've also guessed correctly. While Demonology Warlocks can port entire teams into their own Fellowlord cleave zones, Destruction Warlocks will be able to do the same by binding them all to those flame chains, which will result in massive AoE damage if people would decide to go out of it. Having said that, I can also tell you after testing that if you want to force the bond's explosion, you can simply Shadow Rift them out once they're bound to a place, as that teleport will trigger the explosion, which will result in the possibility of creating devastating combos. Just have a look at this clip of my Warlock friend doing a normal rotational combo without any trinkets nor big cooldowns tied to it, at how strong and effective this can be once set in motion. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be honored if you would hit the like button, as it helps me out a lot and will surely want me to do more PvP oriented content on the channel. This should cover everything the current 9.1 PTR build has to offer in terms of class related changes in PvP. So if you wanna see more videos similar to this one, feel free to subscribe, as there will be plenty more PvP topics to cover over the coming weeks. You can also check out my PvP teaching streams over at twitch.tv/Fintusius. My apologies for those plugs, but I do thank you for watching and maybe see you in the next one. Goodbye.